Today, we're going to install a Delta Multichoice valve, and we're going to do it the DIY way. Welcome to Ultimate DIY, where we teach you how to do your own DIY projects. Today, I'm going to go to a home that has an old Kohler shower system. It has perfect tile. We don't want to mess with the tile, but we need to get the Kohler mixing valve out, and we're going to put in a Delta Multichoice valve. If you're not familiar with those valves, they're the top of the line valve right now. Everyone wants to put them in. One of the big reasons is it has a cartridge you just slide out. If it starts leaking, put a new one in and you're back up in business. It also has 550, 600 different trim kits that will work with that valve. So if you get bored with your bathroom and you want to redo a revamp and make it look nice, you want to change colors, you can just order the trim kit and it bolts right on. So we're going to go in. I'm going to have to actually cut the back of the wall out, get to the plumbing, see what's back there. My plan is to switch that valve over to a Propex, like Uponor valve, or fitting valve. It'll still be the Delta Multichoice valve, but it'll have Propex fittings on it already. The reason I want to do that is because I have to center this valve and get it back exactly correctly so the discussion plate, the trim on the front, will actually cover the hole. You'll also notice that a Delta valve opening hole is much smaller than that Kohler hole. The Kohler hole is going to be probably a 5.5, I think it's about 5.5, close to 6-inch opening hole. So I have to order a special plate to cover that hole. So those are all reasons, though, that I'm going with the Propex so that I can move that valve around and get it placed in exactly where I need to get it placed in. So I'm going to go ahead and head to the job site, and you can get a good view of what I'm doing. And by the way, there's going to be a lot of voiceover on this because this customer is an elderly customer. She's in her 90s. She will be sleeping directly next to the bathroom, and she sleeps pretty late into the mornings. So I don't want to disturb her or wake her up. So I'll probably just do voiceover on a lot of it other than the parts that I really need to describe. And this is probably going to be a 2 or 3 part series. So let's get to it.
This is the Kohler unit that we're going to replace, and if you notice, the handle just spins around. It's not supposed to do that. It has a locking screw inside that just keeps moving. The shower itself's in great shape. All the tile's good, so we're not going to mess with that. We're going to walk instead around to the back right above the toilet area, and we're going to cut out the sheetrock in this area. So the very first thing I do is take some measurements and mark out exactly where the manifold is. And then I'm going to start marking out the actual area that I'm going to cut out. I'll use a framing square because it makes nice straight lines, and I use the outer walls as my guide. I'll do the top and then I do the bottom. So once it's marked, it's time to get out the razor knife and add a new blade to it. You want it extremely sharp so that you don't tear any of the good sheetrock. Spend a lot of time focusing on the corners, cutting through the old tape, and it'll go a lot easier when you start pulling out the old sheetrock. You'll probably have to make several passes on your lines to actually get through the sheetrock. What I'll usually do is make my initial cut, then I'll use a sheetrock saw to go ahead and open the wall all the way up. And on this particular wall, I go ahead and I cut a line through the center so it makes it easier to pull the sheetrock out. Pro tip here, though, be very careful how deep you cut with the razor knife, or especially the saw. If you notice, when I pull this open, the actual vent line was directly to my left. You can cut through water lines, vent lines, PVC. You can cut electrical lines very easily if you're not careful. What I did to make sure that I didn't hurt anything is I used just the tip of the saw and just barely made it through the 1/2-inch thick sheetrock. To speed up the process and make sure that I didn't pull any of the other good sheetrock off, I used the multi-tool to finish up all of my cuts. Especially in the corners, it works really well. Once I get everything cut out, I use a heavy-duty scraper to actually pry the end of the sheetrock open so I can get a handhold to start pulling it out. You don't want to use a hammer here because the hammer can not only break plumbing, break PVC behind it, things like that, but it's also going to make a huge mess. So my goal here was to try not to put any more dust in the house than I had to. That's why you're going to notice here in a little while when I actually start putting the sheetrock back, I do a lot of wet sanding. So there's the back of the mixing valve. The first things I notice is there's nothing actually holding it in place other than the copper lines. They even cut the stud that was supposed to go through the center. So we're going to fix that with the new Delta Multichoice valve. So another pro tip, all shower handles have some type of a fastener which holds the handle in place. And in most cases it's going to be an Allen head. I used a flashlight to shine down in the little hole where the Allen head is at so that I could see what size I was going to actually need. So my 90-year-old customer had to use the center area where the set screw is and grip it to try to turn the water on and off. And apparently she had been doing this for probably 4 or 5 years, maybe even longer. So once you get the handle off, it's pretty simple now. All you need to do is remove the 2 screws that actually hold the plate to the wall.
Got the back cut out, got the front taken off. It's an old Kohler valve, and they did some really weird stuff here to try to make this fit. They had their pipe going through the center that goes up through the roof. That's why they put the valve way over to the right, because they couldn't put it really in the center. This thing goes all the way up, goes underneath the PVC, and your shower head is sitting over here. So it's got some really strange turns. So this is going to probably be my biggest challenge, is getting this cut out and getting an adapter. We are going to put a new Delta Multichoice valve. The nice thing about this valve is you open up the front when you pull off your trim, and you can put a new cartridge in at any time. This one is also going to use the PEX expansion, cold expansion, which is going to make it a little bit easier for me to get this valve straight where I want it in here and get it locked into the right place. Now you'll notice it has 2 holes here. These are supposed to be what you mount against a 2x4. And generally it is going to be mounted directly on a 2x4. So the thickness of the 1x material tells you the depth of where to set it. That also depends on the thickness of your tile. So looking at the tile, it looks fairly standard. The reason this one is set way back is it has a very long stem on the front. It had a special valve kit, and this was a Kohler. It's sealed off because it's just for a shower, so it's going to go into the wall like so. And I use these adapters on the copper on each one, and I'm going to PEX to it. That way it allows me to get a 2x4 here to here, and allows me to adjust this and get it where I need to get it with the PEX. The hardest part is going to be, actually that one won't be too hard because as long as I can tie in there, it'll go here. These are going to be short runs. If I have to, I'll use a 45 to get it up and turned to go in. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting everything out. We'll cap both of these with little shark bite caps for right now. Okay, so the first thing you ever do before you start cutting on anything, even when you're cutting into the wall, is you want to make sure you have access to be able to cut the water off quickly in case you cut a line while you're cutting into the wall. And then as you're working, interesting. Well, I don't think anybody's looked at that in a while. They're using these new electronic gadgets now. But now I'm going to cut the line, so I have to shut the water off. This is your water. It has an arrow showing that it's into the house. All you're going to do is turn it the other way.
Wow, this thing, valve's not very good. So we're going to turn it. We're going to turn it clockwise and see if that actually works. Go check the water, make sure it shuts off. So there is our water. So checking all the other water, it looks like everything is dead, which is good. We'll also check some inside. Okay, so we are ready to solder these. I like to wet the wall down a little, just to make sure it makes it a little harder to have any kind of problem. Okay, like so. And then this is my fire block. Kind of put this around behind it where it's going to be spraying. Alright. And we're going to use a really good flux. I like to use the H2O water soluble paste. Doesn't have lead in it, even though this is a shower. Pretty much anything inside the house you don't want lead. So we are going to flux up the ends and both of our fittings. Okay, see if I can get in here without blocking the camera's view. So I've already cleaned both of these really well. I've also made sure that there's no ridges. Sometimes when you're cutting, the little blade will come off and you'll have ridges. You don't want that. So these are the fittings that are going to go on. And what you do is you're going to rough up both sides. Actually, let me put this glove on too. So I'm going to not only is this already really clean, you're going to take a brush and rough up the inside of these. These are brass, and I'll show you where you apply the heat, because a lot of people apply the heat in the wrong way, but you want it roughed up just a little bit inside so that the flux and the solder have a place to grab. Flux is mainly made for cleaning, getting all the impurities out. It allows your solder to flow. Alright, so these are clean. Let's pop open the flux. And I use a generous amount. And I put it all the way around. Get it on each piece. That way there's no way I missed anything. So, just like so. And then I put it on. Right like that, all the way down. Okay. My other fitting. Like so. That one. It's not feeling like it's going on. May have a slight bend there. Okay, I don't like that one. So before we waste our time, I'm going to go ahead and cut that back a little. I'm thinking it looks like it's a little flat on one side. I may have flattened it some, trying to. So we're going to use a little bit bigger cutter, see if we can actually take this out of the way for a minute. Yes.
Are you still having fun?
Oh yeah. Yep.
I'm gonna trade waters with you.
Okay. I'm gonna have to run in a second, get a couple of pipes.
Okay.
But it won't take too long, probably maybe 45 minutes.
Okay, so this is fresh. from the freezer with the pre-freezing out to the last chance.
All right.
And I'll put this one in the freezer.
That'll work. Yeah, I have a sandwich in your fridge I'll get later. I just haven't had a chance to stop.
Okay. You want anything else to go with it?
Nope, I am great. Okay. So now we'll go ahead and clean it again. All the way down. Use a little emery cloth too, just take out any hide. There we go. Now let's reapply our flux. Like so. Now let's see if this goes on any better. You know what? It may be the fitting itself. So I'm going to try another fitting. Just a second, grab one. Okay, so let's try again. That fitting came out of an old stack I had, so maybe I had a problem with that one before. So, one thing we almost missed. Scratching it up just a little. Alright. Let's see if that one goes on. Great. That is a 3/8 fitting. That gave me the wrong fitting. Wonderful. Okay guys, I finally got it on there. Now the trick is going to be soldering this. Let's see. The trick is going to be soldering and keeping it away from the wood. Shouldn't have too much trouble with that though. This one's far enough away. So we're going to go ahead and try heating it up now. Just to give you an example of how this works. You don't heat here, you're going to heat up on the actual fitting, and once it gets warm, you'll be able to touch it and it'll actually start melting and sucking the solder up in the side. So it doesn't even matter if it's vertical or horizontal once it's warm enough. So, and I use MAP gas. I don't really care for the blue butane bottles. They're not near as hot. I like MAP. It burns a little hotter. Now, one thing I do have to be careful of is not to get near that pipe. So I'm going to do it kind of like so, and I need a little room in case I'm going to try to tuck a little solder behind. I usually curve my solder. For a 1/2 inch pipe, you're going to need about a 1/2 inch of solder. Normally, that's how you know you've got enough. That's really about all there is to it. So those are ready now. So one of the things to be careful of is when you're running your tool here, you have to make sure that this tip is not going to hit your valve itself, or it'll ruin the tip and the valve. Just so you know that.
Okay, guys, there you go. That's the end of episode 1. And in episode 1, we basically went through just the basics of getting that valve installed, cutting out the wall. Now, granted, if this was a new install, it would look totally different. Everything would be straight, cleaner. You have to do what you have to do to get something in when you're trying to retrofit something and save the customer thousands of dollars. The main thing you want to make sure of, though, is that you have no leaks and that everything is functional, as you'll see in the next video. Because in the next video, I'm going to actually take the valve and we're going to put the cartridge in. We're going to set the heat temperature. I don't know if you've ever done that before or if you know what I'm talking about, but there's an actual gauge on that cartridge where when you install it, you set that so that elderly and children do not get scalded. So you can set the max temperature that goes through that valve, or through the valve, through the cartridge. So we're going to do that. Then we're going to put on the trim kit, and then I'll lightly touch on the wall and how we actually clean all of that mess up. But I'll more than likely make that into also a full-fledged video for the drywall section of the channel so that you can see how you match textures and do the primer and all of the tape and bedding, because there's a lot in that process, and I don't want to bore you if you're in this to look at the plumbing part of it, how you would actually fix it. So what I'll do is I'll make that video, put a link in it so that you can link to the actual drywall repair itself, but you'll get to see kind of what it looks like as a finished product. So I know you just got through seeing me actually make my big mistake and put water all over the bathroom. Believe it or not, that was not under pressure. That was, well, I shouldn't say not under pressure. That was actually turned off at the street. And when that happened, my first thoughts were, I must not have turned it off all the way. Believe it or not, it was completely turned off, but I failed to let the pressure out of the system. So pro tip, when you're doing this at home, make sure you open up all of those faucets like I did in the beginning of the video and let that pressure out. I was stuck there for quite a while holding that, holding on top of that pipe to keep the water in until I was able to reach down and get the cap I had already cut off, get it loose with one hand and manage to get it back on that pipe. Kind of a disadvantage when you're working by yourself and there's no one else around. You're kind of stuck in a situation like that. That's one of the reasons when you go out and you turn the water on, you run in immediately and check and make sure that you do not have any drips, leaks, or sprays. Now, if you're working with someone else, that's where you would have them set inside and they're sitting there watching while you go turn off the water, and you're either using a cell phone so they can let you know immediately, or they are screaming for you to shut that water off. I do appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate all the likes. I appreciate the comments. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. It definitely helps the channel grow. And I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Thanks for watching.